funny. People always be like, don't forget about the little people. It's like, why do they refer themselves as little anyway, you know? Why don't you just get big with me? Feel me? They can see it in my eyes.
Welcome everybody to another episode of John's Untitled Podcast. I'm your host, John. Just want to give a quick shout out to everyone who gave last week's episode with Jeremy from Earthgroans a listen. Greatly appreciated. A lot of interesting stuff talking to a band that's newer on Solid State. When doing these interviews, a lot of times I like to do my due diligence and make sure that I look up as many interviews as these people have done. And for this band, like I said last week, there was pretty much nothing. So it makes it a lot harder for me to know what to ask and what not to ask. And sometimes I guess those kind of conversations with strangers equal to be funner just because it's kind of a little looser and a little unscripted as it was. So if you checked out that episode, thanks again. And if you didn't, go back, check it out, and enjoy some of the back episodes as well. This week's guest is the returning Fallon Bowman, formerly of Kitty. If you listened to that episode, you heard at the very end of that we mutually have a huge fandom of the Deftones. I mean, I don't know anyone that doesn't like the Deftones, honestly, and if you say you don't like the Deftones, I'm going to call you a fucking liar, but beyond that, I think that there's something wrong with you and you don't have good taste in music. So if you say you don't like the Deftones, then you are probably full of shit. So we had talked about starting a discography run-through of the Deftones, and so this is going to be that first episode of that. Naturally, we start with Adrenaline, the first album in the discography of the Deftones. We are really brutally honest in this run-through, which is awesome because I was really hesitant to sometimes say my own thoughts on some of these songs. Because, to be fair, this isn't really a record that I like as much as I would say 90% of the rest of the catalog of the bands. I didn't get into the band on this record, and as you'll hear, Fallon didn't either. So I think maybe there's part of it that had to do with it, which that makes me more excited to start with Around the Fur, which at the time of recording this, I'm recording this a couple of days before I go see Deftones. Fallon will be seeing them the very next day, and then the following week we will be doing our Around the Fur chat. So we will have Deftones on the brain, and I'm really looking forward to getting into that because we're also going to talk about the tour that we will both have just seen within a few days. So I expect that to be a little bit more of a lengthier chat. And with Fallon and I, we're pretty good about chatting and keeping it going. And the funny thing about this, when going through the songs one by one, a lot of our notes were eerily similar. Almost like if we were writing a paper and we had notes and you had to turn your notes in, I'm sure a teacher would have said that we copied off each other, because even some of the phrasing was pretty much down to the same verbiage. So yeah, so with that, we are going to get right into our Adrenaline run through. So without further ado, here's my chat with Fallon Bowman. We get right into it.
With the Deftones, even though I've been a not lifelong fan, but a really long time fan. I had no idea that they had formed in 1988. No idea.
Yeah, I thought I remember reading something about that, but I didn't really think it was... Like, I even had gone back and listened to... I think it's called a podcast called Someone Who Isn't Me, and he was talking with Chino a while back.
Right.
And there was some stuff that they were talking about the formation of the band that I was kind of aware of, but it doesn't even seem like Chino was really aware of like when shit really started. It was like, well, we were kind of a high school band, and then he's like, oh, so you guys are like writing songs? He's like, no, not really. And it's like, all right, so it's like,
what's going on.
Yeah, it kind of got this like vibe of like that. The Deftones, as they became, by the time they put out the first record, really had only been a band in that realm for like maybe 2 years, but that they had been started because of the whole accident that Stefan had happened to him, got the lump sum, and then bought a bunch of gear, and then basically like was able to have people come over and jam, and that's kind of how the band started. But they were like a cover band-ish kind of thing, playing like Duran Duran and a bunch of other random shit.
Right, yeah, that was That was also the impression I got, and I Wikipedia'd it, of course, because I'm like, I just want to
That's the most
see.
reliable source.
That's the most reliable source that, as an academic, that's where we go first, right?
Yes.
But and then I think somewhere I read that that whole thing that he got into an accident and all that was not true. But then I read in other places that it is true. So I don't know.
Like I said, he went on record on the Someone Who Wasn't Me podcast and said that he got into the accident, but it wasn't as severe as some things had made it seem. That basically he just got like a broken leg, but because the dude was drunk and hit him, that they ended up having to pay out, and it wasn't some like real crazy amount of money. Like it's been beefed up by what it was, but that it was a substantial amount for like a 15 or 14-year-old kid that he could go out and buy like really decent gear, like decent guitars, a decent drum set, a decent, like a bunch of stuff that it's still more than any kid of his age, and he was still able to buy a bunch of shit and still have money left over, but it wasn't like, $500,000. He was like, I think it was like maybe like, like $30,000 or something like that, where it's still it's still a fuckload of money, but it's not, it's been so overhyped as to how much it really was. So
right.
So I guess we can just hop right into this.
Yeah, you might as well.
All right, right off the top of the record, Bored.
Bored. Okay. All right. Like, how do you want to do it? Do you want to do it as a sort of overall impressions later, like at the end?
Yeah, I was going to run through each individual track and then just kind of some thoughts on that. And then, like I said, once we get to the end, just kind of like what, like random thoughts as a whole, like what we thought about it. Maybe like, I know you said you had a Chino story that I didn't know if it applied, if you wanted to throw it out already or if you wanted to save it for maybe the album that it coincides with.
You will probably save that for White Pony, which is what they were,
what they were touring on at that point?
At the time, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so that was kind of my thought, was just go through track by track, couple of thoughts. Maybe you and I can debate on something if we don't agree.
Ooh, I like a little debate.
And then, like I said, we will hopefully maybe be able to pick a definitive song off this record as our favorite to play out the episode.
Beauty. Okay.
So we'll start with Bored. As I was listening to it today, listening to this record as a whole, I should say.
Yeah.
I was thinking to myself, is there really a more iconic guitar riff to start an album? And the only one I can think of, at least for this time period, would maybe be Korn's Blind.
Yep, I agree with that.
But I mean, to be fair, this is actually a guitar riff that starts a song, whereas like Blind, it starts off with the drums and the bass for like a solid 30, 40 seconds. So
yeah,
I almost think this is actually the more iconic song, because to start to introduce you to a band, because it's literally the very first thing you're hearing is this guitar tone and this guitar riff, and kind of being like, all right, like we're setting the tone, we're setting the mood, and here we go. And
yeah,
granted, I didn't really get into this record when it first came out, so I can't really, I mean, Around the Furrow is where I got into the band, but I do remember hearing a lot of the stuff off of this record as friends were getting into this band when they first came out on this album. But,
right.
So I didn't have too much of a gap. It's not like, listening to some band where it's like they're 5 albums deep and you're going back to the first record going like, what the fuck is this? Like, why do people care? But I definitely remember hearing this song for the first time and being like, all right, like this band's bringing it right out the gate.
Right. Yeah. Definitely that was the impression that I got. And like you, I got into Around the Fur first, and then like maybe I think Around the Fur was 97 is when the first time I had heard it, and kind of went backwards and was like, oh, they have a first record, amazing. So I picked that up and I'm like, wow, to me it seems like night and day.
Yes.
Stylistically, it seemed, and even with Bored too, it seemed totally not nu metal to me at all. But I've always been really conflicted when using that expression, because I'm like, what the hell does that even mean? Right? What does that mean?
I feel like you would actually have a little bit more of a, not a like disdain for, I guess that's the right word, a disdain for that term, because you were actually lumped in with that era of music and that tag. So maybe to you it's a little bit more of a dirtier word than to me, where it's like, and especially in light of now this whole, speaking of Korn and Deftones, this whole weird like Deftones doesn't want to tour with us because of whatever, and then them being like, well, I mean, we didn't want to get lumped in with new metal any more than we had to, and touring with a friend's band that we toured with a bunch, like, just didn't seem to make any sense, and it's like, it's kind of weird that we're like already going like, they weren't really new metal back then, even on the first record, and it's like, well, right away into it.
I'm like, how did that even happen? I think it was just because, two California bands, one from Sacramento, the other from Huntington Beach. Like, that's really all they had in common in my view. It's just, to me, it was just, I felt it was kind of unfair that they were lumped in with that. And I think it was just because there was just nothing else like their sound that they kind of had to lump them in with. I don't know. It just seems like an all-encompassing term and a lazy term in a lot of ways.
I was trying to figure out when the term actually applied, because I feel like it wasn't until White Pony and subsequently Follow the Leader that tag really got
caught
on. Yeah, and so at that point, it's like there's a little bit more. I'm not going to. Well, at least in Korn's avenue, like, they had the dude from Far Side. They ended up having Ice Cube. They on Life is Peachy had the Wicked cover with Chino on it. So I mean, like, they kind of dabbled a little more in the rap thing. And outside of this record, and different parts of this record of Adrenaline, I can't really think of many avenues that really would have kept Deftones in that, like, kind of rap new metal vibe, whatever. So I never really felt like it applied to them from the get go. But I guess it's just like you said. It's if you were in a band of this time period, then you just got lumped in with it because it was not what had come before, and nothing like it had been out since then. I don't know. It's kind of weird when I was going through this record and kind of thinking about these. It's like Bored's like a great song, but it's like I walk away and I'm like, yeah, it's fun and I like it and it's a really iconic song. But then I don't really, and that's the thing with this whole record. I don't really feel any particular way about it. It doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't knock you off your socks.
No,
knock you off your feet.
It doesn't leave a lasting impression to me. And I'll kind of get to like spoil one of my like random thoughts on this, but this has still always been my least favorite Deftones record. Still is.
I have not heard the Deftones, just regular Deftones album. I don't remember if that came before or after Saturday Night Wrist. From before
the one, the self-titled record,
just Deftones. Yeah. Okay. I think that there was a reason because I heard the single and I'm like, okay.
You're talking about Minerva at that point.
Yeah, like okay. It's like okay, that's it, you can tell it is the Deftones 100%. So I can't really say it is my least favorite. It's not the one I go for. Let's just say, like, if I'm going to listen to with the Deftones, it's definitely not the record I like will reach for. It just isn't. And you can just tell, even when listening to Bored, it's an unpolished song in a lot of ways. It's, you could tell that a lot of it was done live off the floor and like, there's a rawness and edginess to Chino's vocals. Like, it just feels like, he did like a couple of takes and that's it, or maybe, he did it live. I'm pretty sure they did it live off the floor with just him with a handheld microphone. I was going to
say, it sounds a lot of it, and especially, and we'll get, again, we're kind of hopping ahead already, but there's a lot of vocal takes on some of these where I'm like, this is obviously a handheld, this is obviously done. Yep. And I don't know, because some of my other gripes on this record are very much what you just said. I feel like parts it's not polished. I feel like some parts could have gone longer. Some parts didn't even need to be there. There's even a couple of songs as a whole I don't even feel like were necessarily needed to be on this record. It could have been cut by a song or two. And I think some of it is just the lack of polish on that. And it's weird because I think that's why some people love this record so much, or even something like Slipknot's first record, where it's just so raw that everyone loves that. But as I've been discussing with some other podcasts, just how much nostalgia being attached to something, how much does that gloss over some of the imperfections or some of the things that are wrong with it? Not wrong, but that are not as good as they really could have been. And I also often wonder how much of it is a financial thing, because hands down, one of my biggest critiques of this record is how terrible the guitars sound on this record. And as a whole, listening today, even, I didn't realize how much like Abe's drums like don't have the typical drum tone that they did from basically Around the Fur on. I feel like there's a lot of stuff fighting for space up front, and the weirdest part is at this point, Terry Date had done so many records that sounded so good. I mean, most notably Pantera around this point,
Yep.
that it's like
Yep.
either had to be a lack of funds to where he couldn't do
Time.
all of that, or maybe time, yeah.
Yeah.
And I've always wondered, and I don't think anyone's really ever asked this, but at least not in anything that I've looked up, I can't ever find anything that kind of explains why this record sounds so different, even in conjunction to the other records that Terry Date did with them from here on out. So I
Right.
always wondered why this one sounds so bad.
I suspect it had something to do with time, as well as the fact that, they needed to be done quickly, as well as the fact that they've been playing these songs probably for a really long time.
Yeah.
And there wasn't really any effort to rework it. I'm pretty sure that it's been up until that point, maybe the same for 8 years or 6 years or something like that, which is
Yeah.
unfortunate. And if they had more time, then I think it would have fleshed out even better. But it is what it is, and that's where they gained their sort of really loyal following, even from because apparently obviously I was too young to go see them at the time, but they had like tirelessly toured at that point, even before Around the Fur. Which is, I just feel it came down to time, them being sort of young and inexperienced, I guess. And
I'm wondering, because at the time I was trying to figure out how long Maverick Records had been an actual label.
And that was the next thing I was
so I'm
gonna
wondering
say.
if maybe they, with it being such a new label, even though it was Madonna's label, I was wondering if there just wasn't enough finances to really invest in a band and kind of like make a big, like put big production together to make this band sound like they did. And it's just like, well, we'll see what happens with this record, and if it does well, then there'll be more money down the road.
Right.
I mean, you never know with labels and stuff like that, like what the story actually is. Excuse me. And like I said, I in the research I've tried to do on this record, like I've never really found anything definitive. This like, and we just kind of talked about in the beginning, this seems to be like a really weird gray area of the band where no one in the band really has like any real recollection of what happened. There's a lot of like hearsay and a lot of like legends around everything, and
like they've created their own myth.
And they just don't know like what's going on anymore.
But I 120% agree with you about the guitars.
Yeah,
and this is coming from, I don't really consider myself like a guitar, connoisseur by any means. It's just, it's so metallic and so tinny, and there is absolutely no sonic, it's not sonically diverse by any means. It's just mid and treble, and it's like everything else is cut out.
Yeah,
but then it's like listening to razor blades cutting into your ears. That's basically like, oh god, it's so bad. But
going into mine is Blindfold.
Yeah.
I always, and even live, I've always loved like that slow bounce that became sort of what Deftones has done across their career. Like they lock into a groove and just kind of like it's a real sexy groove like that everyone locks into, and it just kind of, and I think maybe that's like where some people think maybe like the new metal quote unquote thing was, it wasn't hip hop based, but I think it was a lot more groove oriented than a lot of other bands were doing at the time. I have in my note, guitars always bothered me, recorded in a wind tunnel. Something else I noticed along this record at different times, especially when you're listening to it in a decent pair of headphones or a stereo or whatever, it sounds like there's like a phaser going on with Steph's guitar tone that I don't think I've ever really noticed on any other record. And I don't know if like I'm just kind of hearing other shit on maybe like Cheese bass or just again like the overall recording, maybe something on a vocal that's just kind of fighting over the guitar mix or whatever. But I noticed like a weird phase on some of these songs that I don't think I've really ever been aware of before.
I'm gonna have to listen to that one again because I didn't hear it, but I was listening to it over loudspeakers as opposed to in in headphones. So I'll have to give that one a listen again. But again, I had made the same exact same note about razor blades again, and it's not, that's not a critique. I mean, it is a critique, but it isn't at the same time. I mean, for And there are some Nirvana songs that I feel the same way about like that really, really high end guitar. I'm just not a fan of it. I never have
Right.
been. And, you know, it is 1995. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then I wrote that like the bridge around the 250 mark, I've always loved that section. And the outro, I remember when listening to this record when my parents and I were going back to Delaware for something, and I think we were around the Ohio area, just a bunch of nothing because the Midwest is very flat. And I remember like almost falling asleep because we had to leave really early in the morning. And I remember putting the CD in, and it got to that part, and I just remember like, holy shit, like
Yeah.
just that like the double time feel of it, and I was like, and it's like, why didn't they do that even more? Like just the harsh scream into that, like just
Yeah.
everything about it. It was like, man, I want more of that, please.
Yeah, indeed. I've always loved the fact that he ends on a harmonic. I was like, oh, it's so perfect. It's just beautifully done. And I also made a note about Abe's drumming. He's not he's probably one of my favorite drummers for not because of his like skill and how, you know, he's like a Danny Carey or something like that. He's not like that at all. It's his groove. It's just something about it that's kind of like this reggae
It's
kind
like
of
off time, and his
Yeah,
snare,
it's just-
his snare, hi hat, and kick drum. And sorry to cut you off. His snare, hi hat, kick drum,
No, it's
like
okay.
his three basic rudiments of a drum kit. It just has such like for as much as like I'll probably end up talking over the course of doing this whole discography run through. Something that I've always loved is tone, and no pun intended with it being the Deftones, but I've always thought that as the band has gone on, I've always loved Abe's tone. Like his kick drums usually are not so much on this record, but he's always got like a really nice groove to everything.
Crisp.
Like nothing. Everything's
is
like
crisp. It's
he's
like-
he's probably one of those drummers. If I had to, like, I've never met him. I've never seen his like set like routine of setting up before he starts playing. But he seems like one of those meticulous drummers who sits there and like spends 20 like can actually tune his drums to a
Yeah.
note, and then be
Yeah.
able to be like, all right, we're playing like I think around this time they were still playing in like C sharp, I think.
Yep.
Or maybe,
yep.
yeah. And so at that point, it's like, oh, we're playing in C sharp. Cool. Let me tune my snare so it has like a little bit of pop, but it still resonates really good with everything else. And everything fills a nice, tight sound, and it just sounds good together. But I've always felt like the staple of his drum kit has always been the kick, snare, and hi-hat.
Snare. Totally. And he works it, man. He works it. And it's so perfect. So perfect. A note that I put also, that really characterizes Chino's singing is that really sleepy verse.
Yes.
It's like there's nothing spectacular about it. It's really just the icing on a really lovely sonic cake.
Yes.
I'd like to say. Yeah, it's just smooth and sexy. Yeah.
Heading into 1 week.
Yep.
I always love the fact that the band spelled week WEAK.
Yeah.
Something that like I always love a good play on words, and I don't really see a whole lot of bands doing that anymore. I would say like one of the few bands that I love the fact that they do this is the band The Color Morale. I've always just kind of wished bands would do that more, but I don't know. Like when like I said, I kind of focused a lot on that, and I always was like, oh, that's a really interesting thing, and I didn't really have a chance to look at the lyrics ahead of time. With a lot of this record, actually, I kind of have felt like it's really hard to understand Chino.
Yep.
And that's kind of my other hate about this record is he does so well on other records of enunciating a lot more. And again, I don't know how much of that is due to the fact that he was using a handheld, or that other things are fighting for his space to be heard. But
Right.
yeah, that was always something that I always loved on this one.
Yeah, I feel like that's a producer thing.
Yeah.
Working with producers, that's like the one thing they're like, man, people want to be able to sing the friggin' lyrics with you. You can't just be blah, blah. So yeah, I feel like that might have been like, Chino, do me a favor, can you enunciate those words a little better? Which again, they didn't really have time to do, I think, during this record. So I don't know.
My biggest note on this really was I always thought this song was very and just could have done without this one personally. I know that's really terrible.
No, well, I
To-
mean, that's the point of like going through it. I mean, they know that well, I don't know if they know, but I'm a huge fan regardless of whatever they do. I'm a fan. I'll always be one. So, but so I feel like I can criticize them.
yeah.
So, I know that Chino is a really big Depeche Mode fan, and
Yes.
I hear like David Gahan 100% during this. Like
Yeah.
he's trying. Like Chino's not the best singer in the world, but he's really trying. There's a lot of.
But I was gonna say, and we'll get to it like as I'm turning my notes over. Like there are a couple other songs on this where I think he does a better job of doing like hinting on that and hitting that like I like this, but it's like it just didn't come up. And it's kind of funny because I did a review of the Hell or High Water, which is Brandon from Atreyu, the drummer from Atreyu's new band.
Yeah,
and he's the singer of this band. And I got the record to do the review, and as I was listening to it, it's like 12 tracks, and as I kept listening to it and was getting ready to write the review, I was like, man, this album would be really solid if it was like a 6, maybe a 7 song EP, but because like there are other songs, and very much like with 1 Week where I go, like you're saying, like, oh, I get the Depeche Mode vibe on this, and I go, yeah, sure, but I get it on other songs, and it was done better, so I could have done without this one.
I see what you mean.
To me, it's like one of those where it's like when you're, and granted, it might be as we keep going back to other reasons for certain songs or things being on this. I think a running theme is going to be like we don't know if it was a label or a time or whatever. This could have been a thing where the label was like, hey, we want 12 songs, so this was the best of what they had compared to like maybe something else that had to drop off. But it's one for me where I was like, like. This is probably one I would have dropped off the record, make it a little bit leaner and better and more focused. Because, like I said, as a whole, it's very just to me, very run of the mill.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't really write in my notes, anyways. There was nothing remarkable about it. So that probably means that I agree with you. I didn't really think about it. It's just not something that I would. It's not the song that I would go to.
No.
Okay, let's just say that.
No.
Yeah, anyway.
Well, I guess on that note, right on to Nosebleed. I have always loved the intro / what would, as you end up finding out, is the chorus riff to this. The verse really loses me. Like, I feel like Chino's voice, again, is very indiscernible. I can't quite pick out what he's doing. And which, I mean... in this part of, I feel like in this song, like that's kind of like they're like, oh, here, Chino, do something here. We're gonna kind of let you give you some space, and then it's just like you just get a bunch of shit, and it's just like, oh, okay.
What are you doing? Like, what are you doing, guy?
And then even like the getting up to like the bridge, like I felt like this band kind of like the bridge was always the place where I felt like they explored the most on this record, and this one, the bridge just kind of felt disjointed and kind of weird to me, and I just as a whole like. Considering I love the intro / the chorus, it's like everything else about it is kind of very to me.
Oh yeah, I've seen them 5 times in concert, and this is one of my favorites to see live because he always did something really dangerous during that bridge part or just before the bridge part, and you're like, oh my god, like he'll jump on somebody, jump on whatever, and but really like the very towards the end of the song. I'm the opposite to you.
I'm trying to think. Is this? I'm trying because there's. Is it the like really like slow kind of like almost like clean guitar part?
Just after that.
Okay, never mind. Because oddly enough, and like I said, I only listened to this like 2 times today and a couple of times last week, and I was actually gonna. I don't know if I was putting this in my head because I was going to be talking to you, but like as I heard it, I was like, this sounds really familiar. Why can't I put my finger on it? And then for some reason, I kind of was like, I feel like maybe this was a weird for you, like for matching it to you.
Oh,
it kind of reminded me of Paper Doll a little bit, like the simplicity of the riff and kind of how it sounds, and. I guess like I didn't write that down in my notes because I was like, that's probably just me, like because I was like, oh, I'm going to be talking to Fallon later and whatever. But as I heard it today, it re-brought up that I was like, oh, it kind of does sound like that, just that real plain, very easy riff kind of, and it only happens for like 10, 15
yeah,
seconds.
yeah,
So
not
I was
even,
like,
yeah.
I don't really think like they would be inspired by a 15-second piece at the end of a Deftones song to write a whole
No,
song around it.
yeah. It's
But
interesting that you would say that, though. I mean, I never thought about it. Maybe subconsciously, who knows?
yeah, I don't
It's
know.
just one of the, and what I do like about, like I said, the ending part of it is, the ending part of this song is what stuck with me the most. Just because I'd seen it performed so many times, and every time it did something crazy, and so I just assumed, or I just associated it with like headbanging and going crazy. But
Right.
I love how this is where he really defines that really. I call it his pterodactyl yell.
Oh, the inward
It's like
screaming.
this. Yeah, it's like this. I don't even know what a pterodactyl sounds like, but I just, it's just like, it's Chino. Like when you hear that, it's like this weird dinosaur like sound. It's very strange, but
Right.
that is so iconic for me. So I quite like this one. Again, it's not this record kind of goes in peaks and valleys, and
Yeah.
this is the valley that we're in right now.
I feel like it's also sequenced really weird. Like the more I listen to it, because when I had it on shuffle, sometimes sometimes putting a record on shuffle, you get a better sense of the record, and you're like, man, it should have been
Yeah.
sequenced like this. And on one of my listens over the last week or so, it played like some of the slow, like the last three songs or so were more in the middle of the mix. And I was like, oh man, they should have kind of done it like this. And then it like ended with like 7 words and root and stuff like that. So I was kind of like,
Right.
shit, like maybe the sequencing was a little off on this one. And
Yeah.
it makes me wonder, like, and then I kind of was thinking, like, well, if it was sequenced differently, like, would I think this record was better because it had a better flow? Because I feel like this just kind of is so disjointed and such songs are in weird places, and some of the build-ups that they have, like, just go to shit because of the next song that comes after it, and you're just like, well, whatever. Yeah.
No, I agree with you there. At the time, anyways, when I listened to this record, I always listened to the whole thing all the way through. But then there's this just between, say, 1 week, Nosebleed, and then the next song we're going to talk about. That is the 3 that I would generally skip over.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, we'll go into Lifter then, which is weird
Yep.
because I've heard people say Lifter and they don't pronounce the T.
What?
Yeah, I don't know. I've always been like,
Yep.
yeah, I've heard people, and maybe it's a Midwest thing, I don't know. But I remember getting into like some arguments with people about how to say it, and I was like, it's Lifter. It's Lifter.
It's Lifter.
Like, how do you not call it that?
Yeah, like T's not silent. Hello.
Yeah, I don't know. I've always loved the doubled up gallop riff. Like, it's like a single note, and then it, like, I think on the third run through of it, like it doubles up, and then like, so it's like dun, 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 like kind of has that like nice gallopy riff to it. It's also one of the few songs that I could think of on this record where Chino actually, and it's something that kind of becomes a staple later on with the band, kind of has layered double vocals going on. Because I don't really think it, at least not predominantly like that I noticed after I noticed it on this song. I don't notice it very often on this record of him doing that. Not like it is on this record, on this song.
Yeah, I don't think, did he even do any double? That's a good question. I can't even recall any other songs that he did. Sort of these like multi-layered, big, yeah, like it's not. That's a good point. I didn't think of that. But I don't like the vocals on this one.
Yeah, they're very
don't like it.
Whatever to
Sleepy.
me. But
yeah,
it was like I said, that was the only note I had on. I mean, really, if you look at most of my notes on these, and I think it's funny, you and I have about this equivalent of notes on these. It's like 1 or 2. You're just like, it's cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's and that characterizes the whole. Well, we'll talk about that after. But yeah, it's for me. This is my least favorite song on the record, Lifter.
The only thing that really saves it for me is just that gallopy riff. Like it's a nuanced thing that's not anywhere else really on this. It's the weird song out of the whole thing because there's nowhere else where he kind of does that the double time gallopy riff anywhere else on this record, which is weird because he kind of Stefan ends up doing that later on in other albums. And like I said, it's the first that I noticed where Chino has like the doubled and layered vocals where he's kind of harmonizing with himself and so forth. That I didn't really hear it anywhere else on this record, but go on to be something that Deftones, like, that's kind of indicative of Chino's vocal style over the next, 6, 7 records. So it's weird that the song, excuse me, a song that neither of us really like and is very to both of us, is actually something that sets up a lot of what the Deftones end up doing and being a formula for what they do down the road for pretty much everything from here on out.
I also thought that maybe, I don't know if this is true, but I feel like it's it's not very sophisticated in the arrangement. It's just very, very simple. And I thought that maybe I wouldn't be surprised if it was one of their oldest songs or one of their older ones where they were just learning to sort of, navigate through songwriting or something like that. I got that feeling that there was a little bit of, it's their songwriting infancy song, perhaps. I could be totally wrong about that, but it's just a feeling I got.
Do you think that, I mean, bringing that up, that was kind of something I noticed with some of these songs. I feel like I can kind of tell the songs that were the first songs, that were like the best of the oldest, mixed with the newer batch of songs that would kind of, because and as we're starting to get now in the middle of the record toward the end, there's songs that, and I'll save some of this, but I know, like, I got the feeling that I could start picking apart, like, these are your older songs, these are the newer songs that you started writing around the time of this record getting ready to be recorded.
Right.
Like, I'm almost sure, like, I don't know that there are ever, actually, I know there are demos, like, tapes, literally demo tapes of, like, before they were signed, tapes. But I don't know what out of these songs were, like, on those demos, but it'd be interesting to see how different those sound compared to what ended up on this. Because, like I said, it's very, like you said, they're very rudimentary, like, rudiment songs, like, just very basic.
Yeah, which is not, it's not a criticism, of course. I mean, sometimes that's a good thing. I just thought that maybe for this song, for Lifter specifically, it's not one of their standout tracks, definitely. It was sort of getting their bearings, perhaps, or something to that effect. But I obviously, I have no way of knowing that unless we were to find those tapes, which I'm sure they exist somewhere.
Yeah, I'm sure they're a lot of money, too.
yeah, a lot of eBay or
so that leads us to Root. I have to say, as a guitar player, I used to spend so much time learning how to play the single note intro. Yeah. Back when there was the debate on they play in D, they play in C sharp, they play in C, they play in standard, like, yeah. I think I had learned how to play this song so many different ways, and, like, the very different parts of the riff never came across the way that it sounded on the record.
Nope.
But I never. But I always wondered how much of it was due to the fact that I had shitty pickups and wasn't using Seymour Duncans, or I don't even know if he was using ESPs EMGs at this point, because it doesn't have that EMG tone to it to me.
No.
So I think they were passive pickups at that point, but just always loved the intro riff. Always loved the way it goes from a single note into a bar chord progression to be the song. I've always felt like this actually should have been the first song on the record. I think it's a much stronger statement. I think there's a lot more accessibility with the chorus and the song as a whole. I mean, I think this would have been a better representation of the album or the band. I think as more so than Bored.
And in fact, when I saw them in '97, when they were playing Warped Tour, they opened their set with this song, which made total sense. Like, it was a friggin' slap in the face, and made everyone go fucking nuts. So it's the perfect opening. That little lick in the beginning is just, it's so great. And even that dissonant chord that he does just pre-verse, it's like this really, it sounds, it makes you uncomfortable and it makes you angry. And that's exactly what, they achieved with that song, is, just making people go absolutely bonkers. Definitely one of my faves live. Wow.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the thing too, speaking on this record, like, for as much as I kind of, for me, shit on this record, I've always said live, it comes across way better than it ever did on record. I wanted to say record, and I was like, that's a very almost as I would have said, almost a very Canadian way of saying that. Like, on record, it was It's definitely a little bit
was
different.
rude.
But I've always thought the songs come across a lot more intense and a lot better. But I don't know, again, how much of that is, it's on, they're playing these songs with the gear they have now, with, having 20 years of playing these songs and so forth. So it's like, does it sound better because it's on better equipment and they've kind of, I don't know.
Yeah, that's very possible. I mean, I think that the guitar tone on this one sounds heavy as fuck. It's awesome.
This is one that kind of makes me think
just...
that this was a newer song and maybe was like, kind of makes me wonder if this is like one of the first songs they recorded for this record and was like the one they spent a little bit more time on, and then it was like, oh shit, we gotta hurry up. Because it seems to be like the one song that has like a little bit more better production value on it than the rest of the songs on the record to me.
Chino's scream. I made a note here. Chino's scream is so searing and so on point during this song specifically. And then, when he does that, it's like this. Yeah. It shows his incredible
vocal
potential in terms of range. It's just like, and he could never. What's funny, all the times I saw them, he could never replicate it. It was kind of off, or he wouldn't do it at all, and I'm like, oh, come on, just try it.
Well, it kind of reminds me of a story that I had heard Phil Selmo talk about on the recording of Cowboys from Hell, when he was talking about Cemetery Gates, and Cemetery Gates, when he's at the very end, when he's doing the matching the pitch of the guitar bends. Yep. And he was like, dude, when I was trying, Terry Date had me like match like the note, and I don't remember like the progression of notes off the top of my head, but like I want to say like maybe it was like a high A or something like that. Like the last one, he was like, we seriously like spent 30 minutes recording just that one. Like, it's that thing like where it's like trying to get that super high pitch. He was like, it took us forever, and I almost was like, dude, just fuck it. Like, I'm not doing it. So I think maybe like, because I know there's already like with that story of knowing that Terry Date like pushes a vocalist to kind of hit that note, that a vocal, like in that instance where Phil was like, I knew I wasn't going to be able to hit that night in and night out. Like, there's no fucking way. And so I'm wondering if maybe like that's, Terry being like, just really go for it. And then like, they pushed it and then finally got it on this one take, the magical take that's on the record. And then from there on, he's like, I'm never fucking hitting that note and I'm never trying.
Yeah. And I mean, sometimes he would, when I saw them in 98, I believe, it was 98, he did try it, but he would cut out like in the middle because it was just...
He'd pull the mic away from his face?
Yeah, like he'd pull it away, and I'm just like, I know he can do it. It's just, like you said, it was maybe just one of those things where they did it so many damn times, and he's, never again.
Right.
Never again. So, anyway.
7 words.
Huh.
Iconic song.
Yes, very.
Something I wrote down. Chino has gone on record recently and said because I think there was a performance when they did a festival, I think last year. Actually, I think it was the festival that, I forget what it was called off the top of my head, but like most of the bands didn't get paid because they were expecting so many more people than got there, so a lot of bands got paid like a fraction of what they were supposed to.
Oh, really?
But I think like that was the festival where he brought his like son out during that song.
Oh!
And someone had asked him about the bridge part, and he was like, honestly, I'm not saying anything, I'm just making noise. And I've often wondered if this is just another lure, like where he's like, no, I said something, but it like, it just changes. So I've often wondered.
Want to own up to it?
Yeah, so I've always wondered, like, because this is like another fun thing with doing this, like where Deftones are one of those bands where, kind of like Korn, where, like, I know Chino, like on White Pony specifically, I know Chino wrote like on the first track on that record where he goes, fuck, I'm drunk, and he changed it in the lyric book because he was like, oh, if I said fuck in there and I wrote it, then we would get a parental advice sticker on it. So I wrote something different, whatever it ends up actually being in the booklet, because I know it's not the right lyric, but he makes the point of how he changed it just so they didn't get a parental advice sticker, so they could like put it into like Walmart and all that kind of stuff. And, So I know like he's talked about how he puts in different lyrics because whatever, like it's just, I guess, something that he likes to do. But I've often wondered, like, do you have a story of what you think it is, or have you heard like a what it is? Because I know like three different people that are like, oh, it's this, and they're all completely different lyrics.
Well, you mean during the chorus? Is that what you're talking about?
The bridge
just,
part, yeah, the bridge, like where it's all kind of mashed in with the palm mute, the drum hit, and the where everything's just very percussive.
And I hear something about ball scratching, and yeah, and so I can do the whole rap, but I don't know what I'm saying. It literally just sounds like word vomit. But I am like, he's talking about ball scratching, and it's almost like scat, like rap and scat mixed together. It's very strange. It's very, yeah, it's not my favorite part of the song, to be honest.
Yeah. Other than that, that's really all I wrote. Like it's again, it's an iconic song, but at the same time, it's like it's a song.
I mean, it's a song. It's not as it is more musically sophisticated than other songs like Lifter, for example. I think it's definitely there's much more going on. There's a lot more sort of thought going into this one, but I'm pretty sure Seven Words is an old song for them. I don't know if that's actually true, but I'm almost. I think it is. I'm not sure.
Anything else on your end for this one?
I just wrote that I have always had a sort of dubious relationship with swearing in songs. I honestly, I always thought that it was kind of unnecessary in some ways, but as a teenager, when I heard this song, I'm like,
teen angst that you could like swear.
So good. It's so great, and now it kind of makes me cringe a little bit, but. It sounds such an old lady thing to say, but like now I don't really feel like it's totally necessary to do it. But at the time, my God. Yeah. Anyway, moving on.
Birthmark. This is probably one of my favorite songs on the whole record, honestly. Speaking, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, the end of this, the way that the song actually ends, reminds me of the beginning of Risk from Diamond Eyes.
That's really funny because I said something kind of similar. That I don't think the song belongs on this record at all. I feel like it is completely leading into more around the first style or later. It sounds like a later song. It's more mature.
It's so funny. I feel like you and I probably didn't even need to write notes because literally my next note is, I feel like this was more indicative of where the band was going as between Around the Fur and all that, as opposed to this record where it is.
That is so funny, but it's very, as Deftones fans, we could hear that.
We also have the foresight of being able to look ahead and hear all these other records now in conjunction to it. But at the time, and that was kind of the thing where I was like, do I mention other records and like how it kind of sets up sounds? Because I feel like for me with this, and we'll get there and we'll really probably delve into this on when we talk about White Pony. But I feel like White Pony, so many people were caught off guard and like, wow, this band came out of nowhere with this sound. And it's like, going back, I've always said there's usually a song or two on every record that shows where a band can go. It's just a matter of if you're picking up on it or not. Like I said, like with like a song that we both felt very like with Lifter, it's like I noticed things that became staples later on of Deftones, the Deftones sound. But it's on this song, and it's the only song that sounds like it. Yet it's not done very well. But it's kind of the foundation for what would become a more staple of the Deftones sound that wasn't really prevalent on the rest of this record. So with this one, I feel very much like I said, I almost wanted to have a fun thing later where I'll take the end of this song and see how close I could just throw it into Risk and see how. If my thought that it's the exact same note that Risk kind of starts on. Because I feel like it's a very similar thing, even though I know at that point Diamond Eyes was on a H string and I think is in F tuning, maybe F sharp.
Crazy tuning.
But it's one of those things where I was like, man, this really feels out of place, but it feels like this is, like I said, this is probably my favorite because it's more indicative of where the Deftones I felt were going as opposed to where they currently were.
Okay. Then for argument's sake, I guess then, if we were to look at this song we did not know what was to come.
I feel like
It's
this is the song that pissed people off because it wasn't like the rest. It was too experimental, and I feel like at the time people probably been like, "This is the weirdest song on the whole record, and I don't like it."
Exactly. If we were to look at it completely removed from all the rest, it's so different. It's so.
But
I mean, it still doesn't stand out to me. It still doesn't stand out to me as something that is this is the song that I love on this record. It's still, if we were to sort of look at it as by itself, isolated, it doesn't slap me in the face.
Right.
And it could be a slow song that slaps you in the face too.
But I feel this is where the album turns into the shift that, and like I said, we'll kind of get more into it with the last 3 songs, but to me this is the shift where, to me, these last probably 3 or 4 songs were probably the newer songs and kind of very indicative, and I would even guess that were probably some of the, like, there's probably stuff on Around the Fur that was written, Around the Fur that was probably written around the same time as, like, these last 3 or 4 songs.
Yeah.
But weren't finished, or at like, case in point, again, if you listen to that first Korn record, I think on track 3 before... Clown, yeah, when they're talking, you can hear David make the comment. He goes, "I wish we could put Twist on a fucking tape." So at that point, while they're recording the first record, they already had Twist.
Yeah.
It just wasn't apparently at a finishing point now to record it. So it's making me wonder, like, how much of the stuff that ended up on Around the Fur was written around the time of like maybe Be Quiet and Drive was a demo that was like maybe a chorus idea or like a verse riff, and that's it, and it wasn't ready. Because I'd be interested to see what was written around the time of like these last 4 songs, because I feel like these last 4 are the setup for Around the Fur 100%, and more a representation of what the band would end up doing from this point forward. Yeah,
I agree. That's pretty much exactly one of my final thoughts. Is that it starts going in a direction that I really like at this point on. Anyway.
Do you have anything else for Nosebleed, or are we going right on to Engine Number 9?
Engine Number 9, yeah.
Okay.
I don't have anything else for birthday. Yeah.
I wrote that it's a solid song start to finish. I felt like this was an unofficial prequel to Head Up. It kind of has the same like verse riff, the like the part like with that being a play off of the vocal pattern. I felt like that was very much like how the Head Up part with like Max Cavalera. I felt like the more I listened to this, I was like, this is basically the prequel to Head Up. Even in song arrangement, vocal style, like everything, this screams like Head Up, just not done as well.
Yep.
And
agreed.
That's pretty much all I wrote, is that it's a great song, and it's kind of a very driving song that kind of feels more in line with what Around the Fur would do, like kind of start to finish, like just being very aggressive and progressive as far as like just how everything moves and keeps moving forward.
Right.
But yeah, I just kept getting a strong Head Up vibe on this, like. And sometimes, like, I've noticed some bands, like, will kind of revisit something, but it's changed just slightly enough to where you're like, it feels like this, but it's not. And I feel like this is Head Up, just not done as well.
Yeah. I wrote that if we want to look at the definition of nu metal as something that incorporates sort of hip hop and rap elements, this is the most nu metal-y song that they have on this record, and it's just just by virtue of him having that rap over sort of rapping verse.
Yeah. Probably probably also one of the cleanest guitar tones on this record too.
Yes, alongside Root, in the sense that those two, Root and Engine Number 9, are my 2 favorite in terms of guitar tone. That it is not so razor blades and searing, and
It'd be interesting to go back and look at what guitar stuff was using. If at this point with like Root and Engine Number 9, if he was using those ESPs with the active pickups in it instead, and that's kind of the slow progression into finding what would become Steph's guitar tone and sound.
Right.
So I've often wondered, and especially going back through now and kind of knowing that he's been an ESP guy for a long time, it's always been the active pickups.
Yeah.
That I kind of, and maybe that's why the guitar sounds so shitty, is because he was playing through, I don't even know what he's playing through it back then. I think in the videos, I think he was still playing through an ESP, but I think he was playing through like those Or was it an Ibanez? I feel like maybe he was playing an RG.
I
In
think it
one
was
of the videos.
I think it might have been an Ibanez at that
I
point.
think he was playing one of those RGs, like that light blue RG model. I think.
Yeah, yeah. He's the whole reason why I started playing ESPs. I had never heard of them until I'd seen. Well, we'll talk about that, I guess, when we get to Around the Fur. But like, yeah, I was like, I don't know this company, but I need to know them now, and they did not exist in Canada at the time.
Yeah, I think between Stefan and the dudes in a trio, those are the two biggest inspirations for why I play ESPs personally, and why I like EMGs.
Oh man.
So
that's also a big thing as well. But I own his guitar. I
friend of
went
mine
to
has
ESP and I said I want his Snow White guitar.
So
Give it to
so
me.
do you have one of the baritone ones, or is it like the
No.
6-string ones?
The 6-string.
Okay, a friend of mine just recently got the 8-string.
Ooh.
And I was like, well, the next time we see each other, I need to play that because I mean, I used to have I had an Ibanez AX7, like the just basically run of the mill Ibanez 7 strings.
Yeah.
But they were longer scaled necks. It was almost like a baritone before they started making the baritones.
Yeah.
And I used to love that thing between trying to play like stained style stuff because like he had those 6-string models with the extended neck, so he didn't have to have the extra string. But Deftones and all that kind of stuff, like. It's funny looking back now, like how I used to be like, I don't know why I would ever why I would ever play a 7-string, and then I look back at the time that I used to have one, and I was like, I don't know why I ever got rid of it.
Yeah, why did you get rid of it?
I was broke and I needed to make some money.
Yeah, hell, I know that feeling.
I think every musician knows that story.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
else?
I also want to say Engine Number 9. The breakdown is probably one of the greatest that I had heard at that time. And again, live was off the hook. Like, it was insane.
It's kind of funny that Deftones always have we'll get to, again, we keep saying we're going to get to this, but that's the whole point of running it through a band's discography. They always have like one breakdown in every album that you're just like I can think of, like on the self-titled, it's on not Death Blow. It was a single, but like they have like just a brutal breakdown at the, I think it's Good Morning Beautiful. I think that's the riff, the breakdown riff I'm thinking of. And then like on Saturday Night Wrist, it's on I think it's on Beware at the very end of that. It goes into like a really like Meshuggah-esque kind of vibe. On Diamond Eyes, there's like every record they always have like one kind of brutal breakdown riff where you're just not expecting it, and you're like, kind of like I said with on Minus Blindfold, like there's always that one like 10-15 seconds where you're like, man, you guys could get really fucking aggressive on some shit if you really wanted to, but you just you get such a like just a taste to where you're like, oh, fuck, I want more of it.
Yeah, it melts your face. It really does. It melts your face, and you're like, wow, I need more of that in my life. Totally.
Anyway, I kind of cut you off on your last thought on Engine Number 9.
No, and I was just saying that all I wrote is breakdown best ever. So yeah.
It's good to know that we even write notes very similar. I have a couple that it's like I wrote on the Minus Blindfold. I was like, outro, period. Still kills underlined and in caps.
Oh yeah, no, that's shorthand. That's best friend. Yeah.
I've another track that always gets a debate on how it's pronounced. I always pronounced it For Real.
For Real. I've swung between For Real and Fariel, but it doesn't sound. Yeah, For Real sounds right. Like For Real. Yeah, For Real. Yeah. If we're going with that new metal thing, it's For Real.
Yeah, and like I was trying to figure out like I was like, all right, like if I were to shorthand For Real, I guess this would be the way I would do it.
Yep.
But then like I've heard people over enunciate the fire part.
Oh, Fireall? Oh,
yeah. Or feral, like feral.
Feral.
And so, like, I've heard, like, a few different ways of saying it, so I've always been like, I don't really know how actually, like, because it's like, oh, it could be feral, I guess. Like, that would be an interesting way of spelling it. And
okay.
But then it's like, yeah, I don't know. So I've always kind of been like, is it, I just kind of was always like, yeah, it's for real. Oh.
I have never thought it to be Fireall or Filial or if you want to be really exotic, but I'm pretty sure it's For Real. But I mean, here's the thing: you need to have the Deftones on your podcast, and then that is the question that you need to ask them: how the fuck do you say this word?
Yeah,
and he probably won't remember. He probably won't remember. Yeah, I mean,
I wrote that this was such an odd song for this band at the time feels more like a track that would have been on White Pony, or the foundation for songs that would end up on White Pony.
Yep. Yeah, I had said it's a boring song. Yeah, it is. It's boring, but it's really atmospheric. Which, like you said, like in my notes, I said it seems the atmosphere that is created with it is reminiscent of White Pony. Is exactly what I said.
Yeah.
So
this feels more, and then I'll definitely get into this on the next one, unless we have. Like, that's literally the only note I wrote on this, because I was like very much the same. Like, very. The one word review of this record. It's there. There's some stuff. Yeah. It's fine.
There's about 45 minutes worth of song.
And I could probably think of like 15 minutes of it that I'm like, that's a solid 15 minutes, but...
Yeah. Oh, okay, fair enough. Did you talk about the secret song at all?
Well, we still have Fist.
Yeah.
I wrote Fist is actually the second song that I think is probably my favorite, and I wrote this feels like a song that Chino would have brought to the band before any of us really knew that Chino could play guitar, because it feels, and especially when you get into like, I know on the self-titled record was the first time, well actually I guess White Pony is the first time we would have seen Chino actually playing guitar, and knowing that he was bringing songs, but I feel like this is the first song that distinctly sounds like it would have been Chino bringing this to the band, and then really showcasing Chino and Stefan doing the thing where Chino's playing more of like an octave chord or something with you know, like a minor chord underneath of it, and then Steph just playing a root note, just let it like ring right over what he's doing.
Right.
But the problem I have with it is I felt like this wasn't a whole fleshed out idea. I feel like this is a jam where, like, maybe you start a practice off with this, and you're like, let's jam whatever the working title for this thing is, and then you just never finish it. Yep. And so it's just this half fleshed out idea of like, well, here's this thing, then you do this, then we do this, and then that's all we got. And then it was like, well, the label said we needed 12 songs, and it needed to be like 45 minutes, so I guess this works, and fuck it, we'll throw it in there.
Right. Pretty much, for me, this song, I said it again, sleepy, is something that recurs throughout this, like, all of my notes, is that it's a very sleepy song, shoegazy kind of, you know.
So this is where I feel more of Chino's influences come through on these last few songs to me.
Yeah, yep, and it reminds me of sort of my sleepy, dreamy days in 1997. That's what this song reminds me of. It's just, you know, that unbridled youth and optimism, but also nihilism and
pessimistic kind of shit.
Pessimism and all that, like, it all mixed into one, and it's that kind of song that there's just a lot of things happening at the same time, and I
just feel like there's no direction for it. Like it just wanders aimlessly, and then it's done, and you're like, okay, and that was that.
Is that not being a teenager, right? That's exactly what it is. It's just like being a teenager in a song. Like, there's no end. There's no, you know, you're questioning your existence every single day. That's what this song is. It's just like, where are we going? What are we doing here? Come on, guys. But I mean, it's not one of my favorites, but it has a very nostalgic quality for me. And I noticed when I'm like, you know, listening to it, I'm like, wow, Charlotte has a part that is almost exactly like it, without me not like purposefully taking it or anything like that. I was like, it has that same, you know, jam quality to it. And I remember when we were writing that song, that was exactly what happened. We were just kind of jamming it out. Except we took that part and put it into a song as opposed to like trying to make a song out of it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So, yeah.
Actually, that's kind of a weird thing, since this is the second Kitty reference we've made song-wise within these things of songs, or this batch of songs. Going back through, like, does it kind of remind you of like because there are definitely songs on this where this hit me when I was, you know, early mid-teens, and trying, like, just having gotten a guitar and trying to figure out like how to play aggressive quote-unquote music, and wanting to play something with it, like this kind of ferocity to the, like this much attack. Like I remember not understanding like much about guitar tone or the attack on how you're playing, but looking back, like I definitely remember it was like one of the catalyst records that made me want to play like aggressive music like on guitar and kind of explore like that.
Yep. 100%. 100%. It was, I would say maybe not so, like I said, I got into around the Fur first, and I learned the shit out of that CD, from start to finish. And this one, not so much. Yeah, this one definitely not so much, but it was still so, like, Steph's guitar playing slays me. Absolutely slays me. I tweeted at him recently,
that
saying,
we were doing this?
No, that your guitar playing gives me life. Like, it really, there's just something about it that just makes, it's just amazing. I mean, he's not a virtuoso by any means, but it's just so good. It's so effective. It just spoke to me as a teenager, and it still does as an old woman. So, yeah. Love you, Steph. Love you, love you. I'm a huge fangirl. I don't even care. Like, I fangirled like crazy when I met him. But whatever.
He seems like he'd be really chill and just whatever.
Oh, so very whatever. It's like, there was no smile or any sort of like long-lasting conversation coming out of that guy. But it's okay. I was like, let me just talk. Let me just talk about how much I love you. And he's like, yeah, that's cool. Thanks. Like,
there's nothing worse than when that happens, when you're like, oh man, you are the reason I picked up an instrument, and I love you, and just everything you do is great. And they're like, that's great. And
yeah,
you're like,
and I'm not to say
I just bared my soul.
He was just very low energy.
Probably high.
He was high as fuck. Absolutely.
Yeah, I bet.
He had a bag of weed with him, and he was just like, yeah, that's cool. Yeah. And he was like making a joint at the time, I think. I can't remember exactly, but like, that's just, and the first time I met him when I was like 14 or 15, this would have been prior to the release of Around the Fur. So technically I can talk about it. We went to go see them, at the Warehouse in Toronto, which doesn't exist anymore. And I gave my like wind up camera to their roadie. I don't know who it was. And I'm like, I just want to get a picture of Steph, not Chino. I want Steph. Is he on there? And the guy's like, yeah, I'll get a picture. So he snaps a picture of him, and I lose my shit. I'm like, oh my God. But then the crown on, like the icing on top of that was Chino came out afterwards. And we, of course, I was like, like couldn't even speak. But I just remember him coming out afterwards and didn't say a word, like just like the chillest, most. And I've met some musicians who are like ADD crazy hyper, and it's a little too much. But then when you meet him, he was like the complete opposite. Just all of them are like that though, like the chillest dudes. Yeah, so.
And then you wanted to talk about the random secret, quote unquote, secret track.
Oh no, I didn't actually. I was asking because I didn't look at it, or
no,
I didn't.
I was gonna say I didn't either, but
okay.
I guess random thoughts. I wrote still not my favorite, Deftones record. Probably still my least favorite as a whole. It's interesting to go back now and see the foundation for some of the albums that would come from the band eventually, and kind of seeing the groundwork laid on this. But as a whole, very raw. Still bothers me that the production on it's kind of shitty. I don't know if I would like to see it ever re-recorded, if that would help it, but I think the songs are just... The songs that are good, but I feel like as a whole, it's one of those that I feel like so many people are just wrapped up in the nostalgia and don't see it for what it really is. And I feel like maybe, and I think you'll probably agree, because this isn't the record I really got into them on, it's not, I mean, I wasn't too far from this record coming out to when I got into them, but it's still one of those that it's like, I remember liking the singles that came off it when the singles were first out, but it wasn't until Around the Fur that I really was like, this band has found
Fucking awesome.
their yeah, that they found it. They know what they're doing now. They're writing better songs with better parts. It sounds good production wise. I think this just kind of leaves too much for me to be desired. Like, I think if I would have heard this when it came out, honestly, I feel like I would have been like, it's a solid start. There's some songs on here that I'm interested to see where this band goes, and I guess I'll check out the next show or the next album. Maybe, and like I had said earlier, seeing these songs live, it definitely takes on a different animal than it does on the recorded version. So maybe having been able to see this band at this point would have kind of made some of the blemishes on this record for me go away, because I would have seen it live and seen more of the intensity behind. And maybe it just is one of those instances where this is a band that was better live at this point than they were on record.
Yep.
So
I would have to agree, almost on every point. If I had heard it in isolation from, kind of hearing it in sequence, I don't think it would be something that would have knocked me off my socks as much. Why do I keep saying socks?
I don't know.
That's
fine. The other day I actually made a really on a podcast I released last week. I made a comment about a bucket of songs, and I was like, a bucket of songs? That's not a unit of measure for songs. I was like, a batch of songs is what I meant. So a week ago I said something really stupid, and I was like, who the fuck says a bucket of songs?
That's actually really funny. And it's exactly the same sort of thing. I don't know why. I think it's because I'm wearing socks right now. I keep looking at that. Anyway, looking at it, or when you think about it in isolation, not knowing that Around the Fur was coming out and going to just destroy me, and Chino was my poster boy, of course, right? It wouldn't have knocked me off my feet. It just would have been like, yeah, okay, it's cool. But they weren't there yet. It just seemed they were getting there. And there is just like their total potential had not been completely realized yet. It was almost there, almost.
I figured out why you're focused on the socks, because it's a part of Chino's look. Those tall socks.
Yeah, oh man.
Dickies shorts, those big
tall socks,
shell
toes over Converse.
Yep.
And he always
White
wore
shirt.
Those, either the chinos, Chino wore chinos, and they were like the khaki color.
Yep.
Or, he's wearing this, I remember there was a kid in high school, and this is before Kitty had gone on tour or whatever, and there's a kid in high school who had one of those Deftones windbreakers.
Right.
Deftones, had Deftones in the back, and it had Sacto, California on the back as well, and I would hound this kid. I didn't know him. I hounded this kid. I'm like, where did you get that jacket? And he's like, oh, I went to go see it. I'm like, can I buy it off you? He's like, no, man. Leave me alone. And I hounded that kid on a daily basis. Like, every time I saw him, I'm like, oh, I want your jacket. And finally, I hounded Will Haven, because Will Haven actually grew up with them, and we toured with them in 2000. And I was like talking to Jeff, their guitar player. I'm like, Jeff, dude, you friggin' know the Deftones. Can you hook a girlfriend up? I've been wanting that thing for 3 years. And he hooked me up. I don't know what happened.
I was going to say, do you still have it?
I don't know what happened to it.
Can I buy it from you?
Yeah. I mean, really, that was the only way you could do it if you didn't go to their shows, right?
Yeah, and I wasn't allowed to go to a lot of shows.
I offered that guy 2 weeks worth of allowance. That's $40. I was like, I'll give you $40 for that jacket, man. He's like, no, and friggin' guy turned me down.
But I think the piece of merch I regret not getting is actually the Diamond Eyes hoodie on the Diamond Eyes tour, but I kind of refuse to spend $80 on a fucking hoodie.
It was $80.
Dude, they have the most expensive merch for any band, I think.
Was it good quality at least?
I don't know. It was when I saw them in Detroit, because I didn't even bother looking at merch when I saw them here in GR because I was so broke. But
Yeah.
I had money to spend, and I was like, all right. And I like saw a shirt, and I was like, that shirt kind of sucks. Like, I'm very specific about the merch I buy. Like, I'm not a
Sure.
big fan of having like tour dates on stuff, and I like kind of very plain and basic
No.
stuff. And I remember like I was like,
Yeah.
oh, that hoodie's so cool because it had like the alternate version of like the owl like in mid-flight, and then it was like Deftones, and then on the back like said Diamond Eye something or other. And I was like super amped on it, and then I like looked at it didn't have a price on it because I think I had gotten there right when they finished setting all that shit. I was like, hey, how much for that hoodie? He's like, oh, it's $80. And I was like, fuck you, it is. And I was like,
Jesus.
but the irony is a couple years later I would spend $90 on a Kanye West hoodie because I thought that was funny. I mean, I went up there, bought the hoodie. It's pretty fucking basic. And I remember when I bought it, I was like, and I bitched about spending $80 on the Deftones hoodie.
Yeah, right. It's like a band that I like.
Yeah,
You know,
but their merch has always been really
expensive.
outrageously priced. Like they have crazy like
Yeah.
bomber jackets that are like $300 and shit, and it's like Jesus Christ.
But people buy it. That's
No, for
like,
sure.
Like with me and that freaking windbreaker. Like I
yeah.
don't know how much that kid paid for it, but I'm pretty sure it was at the time would have been maybe $60. Like for teenagers, that's a substantial chunk of change, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, where do you get the money to buy that jacket? Like I want it.
Although I
and
wonder,
I was considering violence, considering it. You know, the first one, it wasn't mine. Technically, it was Morgan's because Morgan was who got me into the Deftones because she had like, I don't know where she heard all this stuff, but she just kept giving me CDs. Like you need to listen to this band and this band and this band. And she had, and I don't know, I'll ask her if she still has it, the Deftones Adrenaline shirt with the screaming, the screaming.
well, yeah,
cat.
they've since re-released that like a shitload.
Yeah,
on
but,
hoodies
like,
and everything.
This was in '96.
Yeah.
Like that's amazing. That I'm like, where the hell did you get this? Anyway, it doesn't matter. So
The
at the time we all,
internet, it's a new thing.
yeah, it's like and she was like the cool older sister who had everything. I'm like, what? Ah. Anyway, there was that shirt, and I borrowed it from her for the longest time because I'm like, oh my god, I just want to wear it all the time. But then I also bought the Deftones shirt. It was a baseball shirt with the the rainbow,
the ragdoll or the raglan tees.
it had like a I think it just had the cuffs were blue, and then the ring around the neck was blue, and then it had Deftones and the sort of like happy writing, like bubble font writing, and then the little rainbow. It was the weirdest shirt. I'm like, what is this? And so there was that shirt, and then I had a red and white pony shirt, and that's it. And that jacket that mysteriously disappeared. And I think the reason why was because I had a Slipknot one, and I preferred to wear the Slipknot one on the Slipknot tour than wearing the Deftones one on the Slipknot tour. If that makes sense. So, I felt weird wearing. I'm like such this huge Deftones fangirl, but wanted to support the people that were taking us along. Anyway.
So, wrapping up, do you think we can agree on the best song?
Are we gonna do a 1, 2, 3 say it?
So is it 1, 2, 3 then we say it, or on 3 we say it?
Yeah, 1, 2, 3 then say it.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Birthmark.
Number.
That was terrible. I feel like that was a setup just so you could be like, oh, yours wasn't mine.
Well.
Although the funny thing is yours. Mine comes first, and then yours, than yours. So
yeah, so there you go. Engine number 9 would be my pick.
I think the
That's
only
reason I don't like Birthmark, and I don't agree necessarily. Well, I don't necessarily agree that Engine number 9 is like the best song on the whole record. They're all good. It's just to me sonically and kind of slapping me in the face, kind of it's the best song in that way.
I feel like the only reason I'm really saying that Birthmark is my favorite is just because I think it showcases the fact that the band was going somewhere else, that they would eventually go. So I feel like for me it's more of a setup for the rest of these discussions on the rest of the records, and that's why I think that's why I'm picking it.
Okay.
But
different reasons, but at the same time I mean those last 3 are the ones that I was most impressed with.
Yeah, I think Fist was, like I said, Fist was the only other one really that I thought that, like, I think Fist and For Real were really the other stronger candidates for my favorite songs on this record.
Yeah. So that's interesting. We were close, but
Yeah.
not. But again, it comes down to sort of where it fits into your life and, your personal style and taste and stuff. So, but
Yeah.
looking at it purely how it makes me feel, and the number 9 is my pick.
Well, you're the guest, so I guess I will side with you and pick that as the song I'll play to play out the episode.
Sounds good.
So next one we will do will be Around the Fur.
Yeah.
I think we'll have a lot more positive things to say about that record.
I don't want to give anybody the impression that I hate this record.
No, I think we very much have said that, like, I think it's a little bit harder to look at this record objectively from a different perspective than we have, because it's not the record that we got into. But I think we are going to find collectively as the people who may listen to this and you and I going through this process, I think we're going to find from the next record on, we're going to be able to talk a lot more about it, maybe a specific feeling and a like remembering where we were when we heard, something like, Be Quiet and Drive, like the first time you heard that, how it made you feel, where you were, something more personal about your life from the next 6-7 records going forward. I think we'll be able to go more in depth other than just going like, it feels like a disjointed song to me. It's very I think we'll be able to go more in depth on it.
So snobby.
And I think that's what we're gonna find, because like you said, we both got into the band on the next record. So I think from here on out is where the fandom really started, and we're probably gonna find that when we talk about every record from here on out, that we're gonna look back on it more finally, have more, like I said, life things happening around the records, being able to recall certain things, places we were, people we were hanging out with. I know for me personally, once we hit like the self-titled record, that's where I started seeing the band in a live setting. So I'm gonna have a lot more experiences talking about like seeing those records, where it sounds like after White Pony, that's kind of where you start trailing off on having seen the band. So where you're able to talk about seeing the band from this record, Around the Fur, and White Pony, I'm not going to have too much to say about it. I can kind of I know people who went and have told me stories, so like from the shows around our area here in the Midwest, but I definitely know that once we get into self-titled, like I'll be able to start being like, I remember seeing this tour with so-and-so and songs that were being played, and looking back on some of the other records. And I mean, Diamond Eyes tour I saw 3 times, I think.
I did not see them at all.
I did not see Saturday Night Risk because they didn't play. I think they only played like 1 or 2 shows in the like Detroit, Michigan area. They didn't tour that record very much from what I remember, but a friend of mine saw that tour, has a set list from the show that was in Detroit, has told me a lot about it, so I can kind of secondhand story tell that. I've seen the Diamond Eyes tour. I saw the self-titled tour twice. I saw the Diamond Eyes tour 3 times. And I saw them on... I didn't see the what the fuck is that record? No.
Koi no Yokan?
Yeah, I didn't see him on that tour, but I just saw them at the start of the Gore tour last year, and I'm gonna see them twice in next like over the I don't think it's on my calendar, but in the next like month I'll see them twice on this this tour. So.
Once.
So on this tour cycle, I'll have seen them at this point 3 times, and then I can talk about the tribute show I threw after they were on Diamond Eyes. So I mean, I have a lot of different shit I can bring up once we get further into the discography, but we'll have to figure out our schedules and figure out when that goes, because like I said, I would like to hopefully get through the entire discography by the end of the year, so we can kind of have a start and finish.
We could do one a record every month.
Yeah.
So, and it's interesting too, because when I go see them, I'm going to be seeing them. Yeah, we will both have seen them by the time we talk next for Around the Fur.
Yeah.
Are they playing with Rise Against with you guys?
Yep. We have Deftones.
Okay.
And that'll be an interesting thing too to kind of talk about, because I saw them with because the Thrice is opening up that tour, and I saw them on the self-titled tour with Thrice and Thursday. What's
really cool about this, when I go see them on the 11th of June, I will be going with the same person that I went to see them with in 1997.
Crazy.
So, wow, yeah, that's 20 years ago.
And there it is, folks, my chat with Fallon Bowman, running through Adrenaline in our first of many to come of our breakdown of the Deftones and discography. Gonna keep this outro kind of short since this episode ran kind of long. Socials, you can find me at John's Untitled Podcast pretty much everywhere, or John's Untitled Pod, no H in John's. Or you can find Fallon at Fallon Bowman pretty much across everything as well. Going to leave you with Engine Number 9. It's not necessarily my favorite song on this, but Fallon is the guest, so I decided to go with her pick. And we will be discussing Around the Fur later this week, as of when I'm recording this. I went and saw Deftones last night. Fallon will be seeing them today, and hopefully we can get into a little bit of discussion about our live shows and how they may be different from one day to the next. And then delve right into Around the Fur, which I think it'll be a lot better than how this one went, since I don't think a lot of people are going to agree with our sentiments on this record. But that's fine. That's the fun thing of running through a band's discography is a healthy discourse between your favorite songs, your least favorite songs, where you were, and all that kind of stuff. So, like I said, keeping this one short. So without further ado, here's Engine Number 9. Talk to you next week.